Good evening. And we are tonight, it is May 21st. It is 5:30. This is the Learning and Teaching Committee meeting, and we are welcome. I'd like to welcome Troop 80. I believe I have the right number. They are here tonight earning their citizenship and community badge. So thank you for coming. This is not a typical board meeting. This is a committee working meeting. So some of the things that we would do at a board meeting, we don't do here. So we didn't stand up to say the pledge, which we do at every board meeting, but you'll see us doing work and I hope you found it interesting. There are a lot of people who've worked hard to make the meeting work tonight. So welcome. All right, we have no citizen comments, so we're just gonna jump right in. Dr. Gordon and Dr. Igo, if you want to start us off.
I certainly do. So we're going to start with a little PLCs in action. And I'm going to do just a quick, I want to just share some data with you this time through. We have quite a few things kind of on our agenda. And I just wanted to, June, I have a full video I want to share with you, but I wanted to make sure we had enough time to really think about that. But again, we've been working all year on this idea of building a culture of PLCs and really focusing in on those evidence-based practices. We're enhancing and refining practices, and we're taking collective responsibility. In this process, we've also been working towards that guaranteed and viable curriculum, making sure that we have a solid curriculum in place. So I'm sharing with you this evening I am sharing with you our iReady spring results. And there are a couple of things about this that I really want to kind of point out. One I want to point up at the top there is our middle school. So this is kind of a 4 quadrants, and we want to see our kids, we want all those dots to be in the top right corner, and they represent our grade levels. And what you're seeing there is that you're seeing that almost all of our grade levels are falling between the 60th and 70th percentile. And then kind of across the top is how much they're growing. I'd like you to look at that very top dot. That is our 6th grade, with over 200% growth of the typical median, right? And those 3 dots in a row are all middle school. So you can see that we are not only highly in that range, we're also showing significant growth. And I think we all feel really confident in saying it is a combination of that high quality resource that we have in place and that PLC process that we are using. So that's really important. And then the other piece that I thought is I wanted to kind of share, as you can see our 3.5 again, high, like that's 150% growth, right? Like it looks not like, look, but it's high. Like I want us to really celebrate that. We're well above where we want to be. And what you can start to see is that as kids are going to start to move through the system, things are going to pick up and we're going to see that growth increase. And that's exactly what we want to see. So I just thought this was a great opportunity to highlight that the things that we are doing and the things that we are putting in place are resulting in better student outcomes. Yes, feels good, doesn't it? Any questions I can answer about that?
You just have 2 very proud principals sitting back there.
Yes,
I saw one cheering. Way to go. Way to go.
I guess the only thing I'm wondering about is this should be shared with entire staff to see where our kids are going to be or are at the end of the year and what that means for next year as they move into the next grade level.
Absolutely. It's already been shared with many of our staff. The middle schools, I know I've seen their slide decks where they've sliced it and really looked at what they can do next, but they're celebrating. As they should.
Thank you. Okay. So next we will move into 2B, which is the middle school structure committee update.
Yes, I'd like to invite Dr. Christensen, our 2 building principals, as well as Pam Jensen. And I think we have some staff out there as well presenting, and they're going to really talk a little bit about the work that they've done in the middle school structure committee to really kind of ground us back in that middle school model.
Right, good evening, and thank you for having us here. We're excited to share with you our middle school structure committee update at the conclusion of our work. Before we jump into the presentation, I would like to introduce the friends that I have at the table who will participate in the presentation with me. First, we have Trisha Abenante, who is an 8th grade teacher at Thompson Middle School. We have Matt Clark, principal at Thompson Middle School. We have Pam Jensen, who is a senior director of professional learning, as well as the SIP liaison to both middle schools. And then we have Mr. Tim Laversky, who is principal at Redling. Throughout our work, the strategic plan remained in focus and guided our conversations and grounded us at the onset of each meeting. The commitment statement, as well as each core value, is embedded within all of the work, from the beliefs, vision, and guiding principles to the gap analysis and incremental action steps. In addition to the visioning work of the committee, each of the strategic priorities relates to the structures we focused on. In fact, each of the 3 structures we investigated, teaming, interventions, and daily schedule, intertwine each of the 3 strategic priorities. I'm incredibly proud to be a part of this team with all of these amazing educators. As you notice, we have a balanced participation between the middle schools with representation from each grade level and a strong variety of content areas and departments. Each of these members committed to 5 months of highly focused work. We would like to recognize the staff members from our team who are supporting from the audience. There were some scheduling conflicts, and so some friends are supporting from other places, but I want to make sure that we recognize our team member by standing, please. Yeah. That's Danielle Dean. She's instructional support coach at Redling. During today's presentation, we will be sharing the work of the committee that it accomplished and communicate the impact of the middle school vision, gap analysis, and incremental action development, what impact that will have on decision-making at and relative to each of our middle schools. The work this committee engaged in included a commitment to the middle school model, meaning that we design the structures, environment, and focus on educating and supporting all aspects of the middle level learner to support their academic, social, and physical growth and development. This is accomplished through the creation of smaller communities, we call them grade level teams, within the much larger school. Each team provides students with consistent groups of adults to work with, to learn about each student on their team, to problem solve ways to address their needs, advocate for them as learners and individuals, and wrap supports and services around them when needed. Additionally, teams provide students with smaller group of grade-alike peers to navigate their days with. Teams provide students with stability and familiarity to support their overall development and academic achievement. Our commitment to the middle school model means that we are not a junior high, which focuses more on content and isolated experiences and individual navigation of the school day. Rather, we are middle schools serving as the bridge between elementary and high school. I believe the middle school model will continue to be more clear as we continue through this presentation. All of the work completed by this committee is aligned to the success indicators for middle school from the strategic plan. We believe that the outcome of this committee's work will increase student attendance, positive behaviors, and academic success as their sense of belonging and connections increase. Students' academic performance will improve due to their presence in class, as well as confidence with academic risk-taking as they feel a strong sense of belonging and are engaged in their learning. Each of these bulleted tasks were included in the scope and sequence section of the charge statement, which was shared with the invitation for all middle school teachers to participate on the committee. These were also reviewed at the onset of each committee meeting and sequentially guided our work. As you can see, we began by rooting ourselves in middle level learner research. We read, discussed, and analyzed the text, The Successful Middle School, This We Believe, authored by Dr. Penny Bishop and Dr. Lisa Harrison. This text, affiliated with the Association of Middle Level Education, incorporates 177 middle school research publications to support the guidance and frameworks embedded within it. This led to the development of the middle school focused vision and all future work. We are proud to share that we accomplished each of the tasks on this list during our time together. This timeline demonstrates the pace through which we worked to accomplish each task outlined on the scope and sequence from the previous slide. We use consistent, clear, and collaborative routines and protocols to create an environment of focused and meaningful work.
Okay, so how do we work together as a committee? Well, we had a structure to our work, and it really allowed us to function at a high capacity and embed educator voice throughout. We did this through having routine agendas that were similar from meeting to meeting. We had protocols aligned to these action steps that we had, and all voices were heard. We made sure that individual voices were heard, we had small group voices, and we had large group voices. We also had a common message at the end of each of our meetings that were shared by the principals back to the middle schools. So the middle schools were kept apprised of everything that was going along the way. So overall, these actions really allowed us to listen to all voices, which built trust amongst the group and created a really strong momentum moving forward. So at the end of each meeting, we sent all the committee members a survey to gather feedback on the process and the products that we ended up with. As you can see, here are some of the testimonials from the meeting about how we work together. So I'm just going to give you a minute to read that.
This slide represents some celebrations based on the overall work we accomplished and the number of voices from the committee members to cabinet to all middle school staff that collaborated in the vision's journey. We know the vision work was successful due to the results of the favorability ratings being 90% or greater on all components. I'd like to point out to you that several of them were at 95% or greater. Now let me walk you through the process. Before we could create a vision, we needed to determine our beliefs. We leaned into the research and the text to organize the beliefs into essential attributes. We then created our own authentic definitions about what we believe of our D303 middle schools. After we determined the core beliefs, we set out to tackle our vision. As a result, the vision statement is structured around 3 categories of characteristics: culture and community, curriculum, instruction and assessment, and leadership and organization. Just as we did with the beliefs, authentic definitions about the characteristics of the vision were developed. This process took a while. It gave us a chance to examine our beliefs and participate in meaningful discussion. The protocol we used allowed for autonomy and voices to be heard throughout the process. The last part of our vision focused on the guiding principles. This component is seen as our checks and balances. This is due to the guiding principles defining the vision of each area as we move into the decision-making process. As a participant and teacher at the middle school level in D303 for 22 years, I felt my voice was heard. Reflecting back on the process, I'm encouraged by the fact that 90 to 95% of the staff are behind the vision and the work we accomplished. This slide provides you with a few more comments from other members of the committee regarding the vision work.
Our consistent protocols allowed for independent thinking, small group feedback, and large group discourse and decision-making. After identifying and reviewing these structures, each member had the opportunity to select the 3 most important structures to them. We were fortunate to have overwhelming agreement on the top 3 structures that the group wanted to focus on. Those were teaming, interventions, and daily schedule. We believe that this points to the fact that we tried to provide a consistent structure so that our focus could be on what would make a successful middle school. For the first step in this process, we used a slightly different protocol, which included the following consistent structures of independent thinking, small group feedback, large group discourse, and decision-making. When looking at the ideal state, the group focused on what these structures should ideally look like and where we were at in D303. This is one example of our gap analysis. We started with the structure of teaming and stayed consistent with this protocol for each structure of both intervention and daily schedule. So for each structure, we had an ideal state statement, a question, and an answer or gap that was identified. As you can see from the feedback throughout the presentation, our approach was purposeful and saved time by duplicating processes we already had success with.
Our incremental action development helped us inform and build perspective on where the gap could be closed. Support from the what to the how. The how aligns the vision, which allows the administrative teams and school leadership team to hook back into the process to make the decision as to the how. This is one example you can see in the case from our daily schedule work. You can see here that we move from our ideal statement to a guiding question to responses to the gap analysis. We answer the question, where do we want to be? Are we there yet? And what incremental actions do we need to take to get there? You can see here what two of our committee members thought as we engaged in our incremental action development work. Our committee then went through to ensure the alignment and depth of our incremental actions by making sure we clearly captured the steps that we felt were important for our success. The voices of our team members show that the power of the committee was in moving through an effective process to determine how we move forward.
There were 3 layers of communication when sharing the accomplishments from this committee. The work from the committee was shared with the district cabinet on April 17th. It was shared at a staff meeting at both middle schools the morning of April 24th and this evening with our Board of Education. This is how we turn the what into the how. On this slide are examples of incremental actions to be taken while constructing this year's master schedule. Those include the reduction of cross-teaming and the pairing of Explore classes. There's also been collaborative work between the middle schools as administrators at both buildings have engaging in regular conversations with teachers and staff through the Thompson and Redling master schedule committees. This in addition to the Cross River conversations to ensure consistency in the master schedule for both buildings.
Before you go on,
Yep.
On the previous slide, you talk about the reduction of cross teaming. By that, do you mean the reduction of the number of students who participate in more than one team in their day?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
These quotes, I think, point to the fact that as a committee, we felt we got a lot of work done in a short period of time.
As we shared at the onset of the presentation, all of the work completed by this committee is aligned to the success indicators for middle school from the strategic plan. We believe that the outcome of this committee's work will increase student attendance, positive behaviors, and academic success as their sense of belonging and connections increase. Students' academic performance will improve due to their presence in classes, as well as their confidence with academic risk-taking as they feel a strong sense of belonging and are engaged in their learning. Currently, the principals and their building leadership teams are incorporating this work into their planning and master scheduling as we operate within our current FTE and budget allocations. Next school year, we plan to convene a committee focused on reviewing middle school scheduling models and making a recommendation for our middle school schedule structure. The work of this committee may influence building and district financial and FTE commitments. However, that impact is unknown at this time. Once again, we're very proud of the work our committee accomplished and the impact that it will have on our middle schools now and moving forward and for all of our students. We want to thank you for your support. And at this point, we're wondering what questions you might have for us.
Where can we see like the full list of gaps, right? I mean, you showed us a sample of one of them. But this is the question I always ask, what's standing in our way? What are the challenges, right? So where can the board look at the full list of gaps?
Sure, I can work on getting those in a format that I will share for sure. with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and along those lines, the gaps, and then what are the recommendations, right? Because again, as you know, we're trying to look at our, like a 5-year budget. We're trying to look at a number of other things. I think it'd be helpful for myself to kind of take a look at it and see what are the things that we think there's going to be a financial impact, year 2, year 3, whatever it is, right, from an implementation time. So, thank you.
Sure, and that's the way that we continued through our work was that we just added on each step of the way. So it is all compiled with teaming, daily schedule, and also interventions. And so we have all 74 of the ideal statements and gaps that we identified and incremental action, so we can compile that for you.
That's wonderful, because I know that we've been talking about the building model for staffing and a number of other things, right? So I feel like it's a nice synergy of all these things coming together. It's a nice synergy.
So I have a couple of questions for you. Some are more detailed, some more general and philosophical in nature. The first is, you talked about things you described as structures, teaming, intervention, and daily schedules. When will you address other structures that are part of the middle school experience?
Sure, I think this was definitely the first step in that process. And many of the structures that we had also identified at the onset of our work tucked or fell right underneath many of these, the 3 that we identified. But we will continue to explore those structures that fell outside of that stacking so that we can continue to move forward. I think our next step in moving with reviewing middle school schedule structures or models will also help us in accomplishing a review of some of those additional structures. I wonder if that answered your question.
It does, thank
Okay.
you. And I'll look forward to seeing which ones of those come next and how that goes. You talked about some success indicators in the presentation in terms of individual students' percentages of attendance. Where do we stand now, and how will we measure the efficacy of this effort on, for example, that first measure that you used, which was not a student is present 95% of the time, and what percent of those students today are present 95% of the time?
Right.
So how do we know that we're making progress towards impact on the measures that you've talked about?
For sure. And that is something that I believe we look at as a system each month to look at the various levels, middle, elementary, and high school, to see what our attendance rates are for how many of our students, what percentage of our students at each level are attaining that 95% attendance rate. And so what I believe is that we'll take this year's baseline information and we'll be able to play that forward each year over year to be able to see the impact that has. I will also say there are other steps and other strategies that our schools and principals are using to also support that attendance piece, but that would be one of those strategies.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I just used the first one as an example to say, we've got a measure up there of 95% attendance, but for the board to know how much this particular program, particularly when we talk about whatever the budget implications might be, impact those measures. And recognizing that there are other ongoing efforts that also positively impact each of those measures, we have the duty to say which of these measures warrants investment of time and energy and dollars. And so the more that we can parse the impact of this program on each of the measures that you've selected as the ones that would show positive movement for this level of effort, the better. And the more that you can share that with us, the better.
Sure.
And if we can take this year's performance metric on these measures as the baseline, that's perfect for us to do. But if we have a 10% increase in the number of students who attend 95% of the time, what percent of that 10% is due to this versus all those other important efforts that are underway?
Right.
We really need to hear that from you.
So my question was actually very similar. It was going to be precisely on attendance, but then expand to all of the indicators. And I'd like to see kind of a side-by-side comparison of kind of a before and after. But I'd like a before as well. I'd like to, if we can go back, and I know we have the data somewhere, a year or two and look at what those things, how those things have progressed over the last couple years. And that'll give us an indication, I think, not only what impact these things have, but it'll also give us an indication of how much of an impact what we're doing is having on these things.
Yeah, I want to just kind of jump in here just a little bit and say, like, absolutely, your point is well taken. I think it's also a little hard, like, it's also hard sometimes to isolate each of these things. But I think that as we start to, we do have that data and we can certainly start to talk and look through that. And then when we're talking about how has teaming impacted kids' sense of belonging, that's probably going to have to be done really through our survey. So we're really working through our belonging, and we're having kids and we're pulse checking them every month around that. But I'm hearing maybe another option is to talk through some of those pieces, just so that we can start to narrow in.
I think that's right. I mean, I don't think we need a regression that is
Yeah.
apportioning, the variance. What I think we need is some way for you as a team to say, hey, this particular initiative is the one that we think is really moving the needle. And if that's a qualitative conversation about your perspective that this is the one that's moving the needle, I can be comfortable with that as a board member. And I'd like to hear it and have that conversation, because we often see these initiatives one at a time
Mhm. So how
rather
do they
than
all
in
work
whole.
together?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which-
that's good.
Leads me to the next question is we have some ongoing work on high school. And clearly the middle school leads into the high school, and we have a lot of advanced work for students that's high school level coursework in the middle school. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are, not only on these structures, but all the middle school structures and how they will relate to the ongoing work around high school renewal.
Yeah, I mean, we will continue to use our process to make sure that those things are coming together, and we're working to bridge some of those pieces. And you'll hear when I talk about the high school experience tonight, that the pieces of the strategic plan are the solid base to some of the things we're talking about. First and foremost is that guaranteed and viable curriculum and making sure we have that in place and those high quality resources that are in there and supporting that. But I hear what you're saying, and I think what I'm hearing you say is if we could talk about what's the comprehensive stuff that we're putting, stuff is not the best word, the comprehensive things we're putting in place that we are hoping is going to move students in the right directions towards our success indicators. And then how are we measuring that very clearly? And I think that's a very fair question, and I think we can really articulate that pretty clearly.
So I'm gonna maybe clarify what I was asking, because I don't know if nobody said anything that's contradicted. And I want to make sure you understand, we came out of COVID. I hate bringing up COVID, but we came out of COVID, and I think there have been a couple years now, and we might see, for example, attendance rates climbing on their own naturally. We might see a sense of, certainly, I think we're going to see a sense of belonging has climbed naturally. Discipline referrals, we probably didn't get a lot of those while they were at home. But these other indicators, some of those things might have climbed naturally, and I want to know not just what impact they're having, but how much of those are impacted by what we're doing, so that we know what to double down on and what to back off.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was gonna take it back to the team, like the not having a student split among teams, right? And if we cross that with the attendance thing, my question and the fact that we identified it as a gap is what percentage of the kids that we have within our attendance, because we know the attendance, like for this year, for middle school, we were in the I think in the 40s, 50s, right? That were 95%. How many of those kids that were in that, outside the 95%, how many of them had
How many of them are
multi-team,
cross-team?
right? How many are cross-team? Right? To me, that's the easiest one that you guys can come back with and tell us as a board, say, listen, we identified this as a gap, right? Intuitively, it makes sense that as a student, I don't have to go to, separate groups, right? But if this is a big problem, we might also, if you come to us for this, we might also prioritize it differently, right? From staffing and other things, right? So it's to me, it's just quantifying again that gap thing, and that's again why I'm so interested in what are those gaps. I might have additional questions, Audra.
Absolutely.
I just want to talk about the process. I think what you've heard for bringing us more, we're eager. The middle school has been it has been, at least for me, something I was hoping the district would hurry up. We need to take care of things at the middle school. So thank you very much. I think I wrote down bravo for protocols. They actually work. And I think, from what I'm hearing and from what evidence you showed, the staff trust you now because you did it in a way that was, concise, looked at the problems, identified the needs and worked through things. And that's also part of PLC work. So to do it at a building wide level is part of what we have all invested in on how to do things. So bravo, thank you very much. And I would look forward to seeing all those ideal statements and what you found out, because I think that shows us that you really have rolled up your sleeves. So thank you for getting started, and I think we're on the right track. Any other questions or comments? Right, thank you so much.
Yeah, I would just chime in, just say thank you. Thank you for your entire team. Thank you for representing them for the work that you're doing for our middle school students. For those of us who were former middle school teachers, administrators, we know it's different. And that each level is very different, but middle school has its own unique place in the heart of many people. So thank you for having that heart to do this work. But this is game-changing work, because it's putting together, the pieces that we like to talk a lot about, really good structures in place that are going to support our students throughout their middle school experience. But mostly, thank you for all the time. That's a piece that you did not hit on. You spent a significant amount of time as a team together after school, coming together, reviewing, really being thoughtful with the comments and sharing back out. So thank you for your work.
All right, so moving on to 2C, now we're going to go up to the next level, the high school experience.
So I'd like to invite Dr. Christensen and Shanna Lewis and Jim Richter up to the table. So this evening, you're gonna hear my voice as I kind of lay out kind of the plan, but as it's not my voice alone, I work very closely with the principals and the department chairs to bring some of these things forward. And they're here to help us answer questions and really kind of think through kind of those next steps. So really, this is kind of our outcomes for this evening, really focusing in on making that comprehensive and cohesive 12 to early childhood academic program. And we're going to really focusing in on integrating college and career pathways and really thinking about the ideas of preparing and transitioning students into those post-secondary opportunities. If we think about our strategic plan, this really does align nicely with our strategic plan and the pieces. At the heart of it, we're really going to talk a lot about achievement tonight. We're going to talk about what does that look like when we have high level rigorous experiences for our students. And we clearly align them with their post-secondary pathways so that they can start to see that this impacts this, which will allow me to do this, right? So it really hits on that idea around achievement, perseverance, and also kind of a sense of belonging, because we're also going to talk about the importance of having multiple different ways to do that, and that how are we building some of these things to work together. As we look at our strategic priorities, it's going to hit all of our strategic priorities with a strong focus in this instructional coherence. But I also want to point out effective collaboration, and not only through the PLC process, but also through that purposeful family and community engagement, because we're really going to start to talk about the importance of the family being at the table and that the family being at the table at an earlier time. As we think about what is our end goal, we're really working to make sure that our kids are college, career, and life ready. And that we have kind of defined that in our strategic plan by students meeting 2 of these 3 indicators. So all of our work this evening is really going to align with and help support students in reaching this end goal.
Dr. Igo, I'm going to just chime in for just 1 second. I know we've talked a lot about this during our planning and whatnot. Can you just remind me or what your thoughts are of how we weight these individual 3 indicators here? Naturally, we're looking for 2 out of 3, but do we weight one, disproportionately versus another? Are we Is it a better indication of a successful student if they have a certain combination versus another combination? Can you expand on that a little? bit?
I certainly can. And the research doesn't necessarily say it's these two are better or more insufficient than another. They really do talk about that, really having that any two of these prepare students to be prepared, prepare students to successfully engage in some type of post-secondary learning. And we know today that we need to prepare kids regardless of what they're going to do, whether it's college or not, for some type of post-secondary learning. But any combination will get us to the goal. Okay. Just kind of wanted to paint out that big picture view of where we're headed. And this is really this idea that we want to integrate our college and career pathways with our core academic courses. And so when we're integrating these things, we're really talking about how are we leveraging our college prep and our college courses, or core courses, I should say, in with our career technology kind of education classes. And that as we're building them, we're thinking very strategically about those pathways that we're setting students up to be able to leave us in a position to earn a livable wage. And we've kind of defined that livable wage as being able to support yourself and one other person, right? And there's some research kind of around that. But that as we're building it so that they're stackable. And when we talk about stackable, it's an industry, I might walk through this program and get an industry credential. It might lead me clearly to an associate's degree, or it's going to continue to build myself into a bachelor's degree or more. As we kind of think about what might that look like, this just kind of provides a big picture overview of how we make those connections. And I'm kind of focusing us on that green up at the top. On the left-hand side, what we have is like the college courses, and those are the career-focused courses as they relate to business and financial services. And then as you slide over to the right, you can see how they then lead to different opportunities for kids, accounting or business or supply chain. And then what are the credentials that they might have and how those credentials really could first start at an associate's degree for this particular option and then into a bachelor's degree, so that kids are starting to see how each of these things kind of work together. And again, thinking from that picture or that big picture view, so what does that mean for our students? It would mean kind of starting to set up our course catalog book to look like this. Now, this is an example that we took from the District 214 academic guide. And what I really want us to point out and see here is that those career focused courses are at the top. The graduation requirements are at the bottom. But on the right-hand side, you start to see what are the career-related electives that students might want to engage in? What are the career-related activities, extracurricular activities that might support a student along the way? So again, what we're doing is kind of we have this information, but we're organizing it and merging it together so that if a student is interested in something, they have a quick, easy place to go and see, this is what I need to do, and this is how this would lay out. So we kind of
Dr.
Yes.
Igo, before you go past that, that example, I noticed on the right-hand side, both the courses in terms of career-related electives, but also not only career activities that are recommended, but also the requirements for four-year universities. And while I recognize that all universities have differences in what they require, what a template like this provides is for anyone, parents or students who want to explore, they can see what is required for them to get into a typical university for this issue area or this content area. So I appreciate the example and the way that it's laid out, because it not only says these are the courses here at the high school, but these are the things that the typical college might require.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Well,
Appreciate that.
I was going to hold the question to the end, but since it kind of dovetails with that one, have we looked at, I know like the associate's degree that students might get, the dual
Like a dual credit.
degree diploma. Have we looked at the acceptance of that as, do all the colleges accept that as a typical associate's degree, or do they?
So the point of my slide before wasn't necessarily that students were earning that associate's degree while in high school, but it's certainly a possibility.
That's why I was going to hold it up.
Yeah, it's
but-
really about that we're showing kids how those things connect and what would their next steps be.
But to your question around, the associate's degree in Illinois. That is
That's
that is an
correct, yes.
accepted associate's degree throughout any college, university in the state of Illinois, and that's generally how it works. And generally speaking, that is also accepted outside
Right,
of
we had
Illinois.
talked about that with.
It's
the-
harder for us to say definitively, but we know for a fact that within the state
That's
of
true.
Illinois, that associate's degree transfers fully.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
That's
asking.
what, I thought that's what
because-
you're asking.
Oh, I'm
Eh,
Sort of,
okay.
because
Understood.
I know we talked about like an AP score of 3 in Illinois. You get an AP, that's kind of what I've written down as a comparison to that. If you get a 3 in Illinois, it must be accepted. That does spur other colleges outside of Illinois to accept it to compete for those students. So I'm just wondering, that was the first part of the question. The second part is, individual courses in Illinois, are those individual courses then, are they required to be accepted as individual courses just as if they were to come from ECC?
In the dual credit world,
Yeah.
yeah, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that,
Within the Illinois system.
right, but no, and I know we can't,
Yeah.
so we can't
Yeah.
say nationally, but I.
Right, but even there, we have to be clear, it's for the public universities in the
That's
state of
also
Illinois,
true.
not the
Yes,
private
thank you,
universities.
Mr.
What
Lackner.
Notre Dame or Loyola does is up to them.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and that was kind of part 3, but
Mhm.
thank you for that. Okay,
There's, just as a quick aside, it's the Illinois Articulation Initiative is what we're referring to here. And there are a number of courses in addition to the regionally accredited degrees that are transferable to those institutions.
Thank you. So as we're thinking about this work, really kind of divided this into kind of 4 big areas that are kind of they're interrelated and working together to get to that college career and life ready. And that's integrated college and career pathways, comprehensive post-secondary planning, transitioning to post-secondary goals, and then rigorous, making sure every kid has a rigorous academic experience. I'm going to talk about each of these tonight and each of those pieces. This provides us a big picture overview of where we're going and how we plan to lay that work out over the next 3 years. I'm going to talk about this in more detail as I get into each and every one of these areas. So first, I want to talk about this integrated college and career pathways. And what's really important around these college and career pathways is kind of that we're grounding ourselves in these big ideas. And the big ideas really are about making sure that we're talking about skills and needs of industries that are within our region. What is it when our students, what is happening in our current region and where are the skills needed? That we're really, again, thinking about those stackable credentials that I might be able to earn an industry credential, an associate's degree, and a bachelor's degree. I might do that all within my time. I might do that, across 12 years, but that we're showing kids how those things build upon each other. And that we're really thinking about that and how we're going to integrate those 4 advanced courses, 2 of which are really specialized in career focused areas, and then 2 that are in our core areas and helping kids earn that early college credit. We also are thinking about how do we build in that work-based learning experience for kids, and that we're thinking about and we're helping kids understand that we have to begin exploring and understanding their interests in middle school, and also connecting their learning in middle school to some possible potential post-secondary options so that they start to understand the choices I make in middle school are going to impact the choices I make in high school, which is going to then impact the pathways I may have moving forward. So it kind of grounds us. In our particular region, and we did this with ECC a while back, is we look to see what are the needs in our community and what does that look like. And so these are the 5 areas that have been identified as needs within our industry or within our region. As we're beginning to build those things, build those pathways, we're really going to be focusing in on kind of making sure that every kid has an individual plan, that we're giving them opportunities in those career focused areas where there's some orientation courses, there's some skill development, as well as some capstone or advanced opportunities for them to engage in along the way. And so we've been working with CTE and our department chairs to set up what is the CAI process like and where are we going to start. So you can see here that we're going to start with business and finance and engineering next school year. So we'll start in that developing stage where we'll start to pull those pieces together, move into that implementation stage in 25, 26. We're going to talk about the next year really through education and then video production, and video production is not maybe one of the ones in those areas, but again, we're looking to find many different opportunities that might be available for our students with that implementation in 26, 27, and then information technology moving on from there. This kind of provides a high level or a look at what that finance pathway might look like. And so at the top, what we've done is we've identified what are those career focused classes that you would take across your high school experience. But what I really want to point out here is kind of the math, because we've really identified the different things that you need. And if you're really going to study finance and math, then you really need to finish calculus by the time you leave. So we want to make sure kids know and understand that they would want that algebra 1 in 8th grade. And so we want to help kids start to make those connections. And then if they haven't had it, you'll see me talk a little bit later about how are we building on-ramps and opportunities for kids.
I think this is a really healthy look. I think there's a couple of things for us to layer in that we have yet to discuss. When you shared the template example that had all those college requirements on the bottom right, those are for a typical university. I had the pleasure of being at both the North and East Senior Awards nights, and we have some students who do some really impressive things. We have students headed to Northwestern and Notre Dame and the University of Illinois. Those are atypical colleges, and they have requirements that exceed the expectations. So when we talk about the requirement to complete calculus, if you have the desire to go to the Kelley School of Business at the University of Indiana, that's one thing. And it's probably different than what a typical four-year university might require. And so there is some distinction. One of the things that I appreciate about this discussion is that we're talking about not only the state requirements for graduation, but the way students could explore a topic area. But I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are different levels of expectation, both in terms of coursework and performance in those courses that the different universities will require. And that's getting more competitive, not less.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I would agree. And really, when we did this work, we really focused in on the majority of schools were asking for this. Now, of course, there's always a school here or there that might not require that, or might say it's okay here or there. Like all of these things are, depends. They all tell you they're going to look at the comprehensive look at a student and make those decisions. But what we want to do is offer kids the best opportunity. And that was really what we were trying to do here. This kind of lays this out about, I'm sorry. Do you have a question, Mr. Lentz? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
On the previous one, I'm kind of thinking, right? So one of the things that we know, and especially in the college experiences, sometimes students change their majors.
Yep.
Right. I'm as shocked as you are, right? But the thing that I'm thinking here, right, is as we orient down career paths and other things here, and we put this is there's a well-rounded student in this, depending on how you slice and dice each aspect of this, right? And so if they are going down the approach of accounting, for example, and then they say, oh, this, I get into Calc AB or what, and they're like, I hate this. This is not for me, right? That is something that I think, especially with our students, right, and starting to find their career path and everything else, is that we need to be aware in these steps of various on and off ramps, right?
Absolutely.
And that's my, just because I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of it like a college catalog, right? Of in here. So it's almost like there's a heat map in this of saying like, hey, listen, these are the core subject, right? It satisfies our graduation requirements. It does X, Y, and Z. And then these are the branches that it kind of potentially sets you up for. And I think being able to show that sooner, right? And you mentioned middle school, but that's the part, right? Your point is well taken of, students going for elite, right? But we have a bulk of students who we're going to get in this and they're going to change their mind and want to do that. And so that's where it wasn't a question, Christine. It was more of just, I'm looking at it and having this thought.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to agree with you 100%. And I think it's really important that we're thinking about those on and off ramps. I'm going to be honest, like I struggled a little bit with this because I thought, my goodness, they're 14, 15. But what really helped me think differently about it was it gives kids a chance to try something out now and like back out of it
Yes.
and decide to go someplace else, right? Like I have my own child where I can speak to, enrolled in engineering courses, came home and she's like, this was not for me. Great, that changes our whole pathway.
Yeah.
But we also will need to be building those things in as well as we
Okay.
kind of go
And,
forward.
and that it's along lines of almost like, I hate to say it, like filter things. So giving them, helping them dip their toes early. Right? Because again, this is the time where it's safe for them to fail. It's safe for them to try things and do that. And that's where I want that to be at the kind of at the back of our minds as we're going through this.
It kind of, it likens to the versatility of a pathway in a collegiate degree, right? Something that is transferable to other majors. If someone's going the nursing route, like you're starting with the curriculum that is necessary for that. And if you transition to an education degree, for example, it's going to be wildly different as far as prerequisites and core classes. And so maybe the versatility of the programming that they take here and what that lends itself well to general studies degrees or more specified degrees. And I just wanted to comment on a slide you're going to like here in a little bit, because Dr. Igo worked, quite a bit on also understanding the differences between highly selective institutions, somewhat selective institutions, traditional institutions, community colleges and the like too. And so I think that's a lot of what we're seeing now is actually spawned from a lot of the questions that we've had around the board table over the last year or so in hopes of enhancing that experience and then not pigeonholing these students into one direction in the event that they go on to engineering and isn't their favorite
It's
thing.
not their thing. Yeah.
Well, we have the experience here, the Synergy program, which has some pretty stringent's too strong a word, but stringent requirements about participation and being within that track for the entirety of the program. Maybe we take some lessons there. I think there's this notion also when we look at a table like the one up here that says we have 3 social science credits. That's true for graduation for sure. And then part of the question becomes, how do you fill that out if you think about the finance college pathway and you'd like to go to a highly selective university? How do you fill that out if you think this is your pathway and you'd like to go to a less selective university? Those are, I think, routes through this kind of conversation. We still have to fit the 3 social science requirements in, and maybe for highly selective, you have to get a 4th. We saw a student at the East celebration who took every science course that was offered to her, and she won the science award from the department. And I think, that's indicative of a student who knew what she wanted to do. Maybe other students have to do a couple of different pathways.
And I think when we get into that comprehensive planning, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can do some of that.
You're going to talk about on and off ramps as well.
I'm not going to talk specifically about them, but as we're building, we'll be thinking about those on and off ramps. So this really kind of outlines that financial impact as we begin to integrate. Now, many of this is kind of, we would be doing no matter what, because we would have to, we need to update our curriculum and begin those processes along the way. So some of that is in there, and money we would spend no matter what, because we need to do that. And then there's some things that need to be determined. So as we dive in and really start to lay out some of these pathways, I'm confident there'll be equipment that we are going to need that I'm not capable of telling you what that is at this moment, or that we're going to need teachers with specific teaching credentials that aren't currently there. And we're going to have to create a plan to help incentivize teachers to get the certification we might need.
So, and you, if you have an answer for this later, I didn't explicitly see it, but please.
It's okay.
One of the things we talked about previously was any gaps, right? So we're talking
it's
about,
coming.
okay.
All right, so now let's move into this idea of comprehensive post-secondary planning, right? So first we have to have those integrated pathways. We're going to be doing a lot of these things at the same time so that we're ready to roll. But this idea of comprehensive post-secondary planning. And so the last time we met, Mr. Lynch, you had asked me, like, I had given some research. You're like, well, what is our current state? What are those gaps? And so this really kind of, they're high level gaps, but they kind of outline where we are. And so in our post-secondary planning, what the research is telling us is it has to begin in middle school. We need to help kids with individualized 4-year plans that we're developing and reviewing with them consistently. And with that idea of developing and reviewing is where those ideas, if we're having those conversations about how are you feeling about this? Are we on the right track? What does that look like? What kind of college are you looking for? So we can start to align some of those things. And that we're really thinking about how are we clearly communicating those things. And in our current state, we don't have a strong connection back to middle school. And that we do have a standard protocol that we use for our students to enroll and kind of do that process, but we haven't built out an entire system that really says, this is an important part of what we do, and therefore we're going to create time in our day to make these things happen so that kids have time to reflect and engage in conversation and ask questions in that way.
So in this, we talked a little bit about previously about the burdens that we put on staff, right? And our administrator ratios and everything else. Where do we see some of this guidance happening, especially at the middle school level? Where do we see this? Because I can tell you, one of the things I've heard from a number of parents when we're talking about, we're talking about some of the media things and some of the, the electronic and everything else in that transition. Middle school is it's a big time for a lot of people, right? In your vision, where's this happening staff wise? And
The way I have this set up
okay.
is I've got them, and then I'm going to talk about the recommendations and then the next steps to make those recommendations happen. And so I hear that loud and clear. And so one of the things that we really need to do is we do need to revise our system and our processes for doing that. And our next step is really, we need to bring a group of 6-12 educators together. Yep. To really think about what does that look like? And some of the things that we are going to ask them to do is really think about this idea of collective responsibility for post-secondary planning. So how are we as all educators, what might that look like and how can we do that? And then the second piece, and this is also really fits into that planning piece that we were talking about in those on and off ramps, is investigating systems that support building, monitoring, and adjusting those 4-year plans. So there are college and career readiness platforms that we now have access to that allow us to do this work. And that platform helps build instant communication between kids and families and staff to be able to say, where am I at? How am I doing those things? So we really do need to spend some time really thinking about how is the best way to do that in our current system, but we need to bring our educators in and begin that work.
Can I ask also that from a community perspective, at least, perhaps, somebody who's been through, right? It might be a board member, right? Who has a child, I don't want to nominate you, but who's had a child who go through selection process, right? And everything else. And what were the challenges in this? Right. And then a parent going into middle school, because I can tell you one of the things, and we've talked about this before, but the handout of the electives, right, for middle school, it's the PDF, it's sent out. What's the elective? You choose, and it has the codes, right? Here's the course codes that mean something to us, but the parents, it does, right? And it doesn't have that tie-in. So that's where, again, I would, I think the staff and avoid that's incredibly important in this, but I'd really love to have a, parent and community voice in this as well, because again, there's a lot of stuff we don't know that we don't know.
Absolutely. And I think that committee will really spend some time figuring out how they're going to do that. Are they going to do focus groups with families? Are they going to do focus groups with students? Are they going to survey students? Like that will be the work that they get to really.
I will volunteer for the focus group.
That's more than fair. More than fair. But that really is that work. But like, we really do want to be thinking about that very intentionally and helping everybody make connections as they're thinking through that process. And then really kind of updating that course offering. But this is something we can do pretty fast and pretty quick. And connecting our enrollment with those post-secondary plans. And so I think, this is really what we're thinking about. And this is that idea, right? We're talking about these integrated college and career pathways. But we also then need to think about, well, what is it that students want? And do they want to attend a highly selective university? That like Mr. Lackner was saying, that requires things that look different. And so how do we combine those two things? And part of that college and career ready platform will allow us to do that, being really clear about this communication so that families know up front that if this is what I really want, now I need to connect this back to this college and career, and then we can show people how to do that and how to look at that. But it really does kind of lay out the idea around what is it that depending on where you want to go and what you want to do, you can kind of start to think about how do I need to think about my course enrollment? And what I think is really important is that this really identifies like the 5 core classes that the universities are looking at. And so they talk about wanting in your schedule 4 of these every year, right? That's kind of the minimum piece to that. So that's kind of at the bottom that we're going to talk about and kind of move that through. And then we'll talk about how do we help kids understand what it means to, if I want to go to Notre Dame, or if I want to go to University of Michigan, or yeah.
I think this is fantastic. I think this is what we've been looking for. I know you're not done, but we also have groups of kids who don't know what they're going to do. And sometimes it's just get me out of middle school and get me into high school. So I think those are key components. It's also part of that belonging. It's also, do you know what you want to be when you grow up? There are kids who don't know. And I think we have to recognize that I may choose to do this path, but
Absolutely.
I may
Yeah,
not
and
go
that's
there.
really what that first column is, if I might want to go to a community college program or vocational school, right? Like that's what, here's what we need to do and here's what we are recommending. And in the middle is that like, I just, you know, I just want to, any university, I want to go to a community college and transfer, right? If I want to go to a community college and transfer, that looks different as well. So this is really meant to help kind of zero people in, but also be respectful and honor that everybody can make a choice and that whatever choice they choose to make is fine. And we will help support you in being prepared for it and transitioning into it. So this kind of lays out, again, that financial impact over time, and really the one, probably the cost is really that college and career readiness platform. That will be an ongoing cost, right? Once we decide and we pick one forward, we'll have that. We've taken that into account as I'm working through my 5-year financial planning.
Matt put that in the SAS requirements thing, like for an integration, make sure that you have.
Oh, yeah, we don't have anything in mind yet, but when we do, we will work with Matt, to make sure it all works. Yep. Yeah,
Because, yes, that, I mean, that's to me, it is critical.
yeah, 100%. 100%. And so just kind of like zeroing in on what does that mean for this particular work, in that we can update that course offering book rather quickly. But really think about that comprehensive planning, that we'd be back here in June of 2025 with those recommendations. Whatever those recommendations are, we're going to need some time for learning for educators and families in that following year. So then when we really be looking to implement for the 26-27 school year for our kids entering grade 6 and grade 9. When we talk about transitioning to post-secondary schools, we talked about we want to not only prepare kids, but be ready to transition them into those post-secondary schools. This was some of the research that we talked about last time, and probably the big takeaway here really lies in the idea that we want our students to meet those college and career benchmarks by the end of their junior year. And so in order, and then if they have met them, then we start to think about how can we provide them with advanced experiences, early college credit, work opportunities, internships. And then if they're not, how do we put some of those things in place that help can come in and kind of support? And I think probably the biggest takeaway for us here really is around grade 10 and our course enrollment pattern. So I'm just going to talk about that a little bit. That one of the things that's really important for college and career readiness in hitting those benchmarks is ample opportunity to engage in informational text that is of high rigor and high complexity, and then being able to write about that text, right? That's really what we need to be able to do in college. And so if we look at how we've got students rolled in freshman year, they're going to take biology, which is a heavy reading course. Time for a break. Biology, heavy course. They're going to take a world geography or a world history course as a social studies course, another heavy informational course. They're going to take an English course, which is going to meet some of those informational texts as well as literature. They're going to take a math course. When we move into their sophomore year, that second year, they are not required to take in a social studies. And about 50% of our students choose to, and 50% of our students don't. But the part that's we want to make sure we address is they also then enroll in chemistry and not biology. And chemistry is a little bit more math. And it kind of reduces the amount of informational text that they're going to have opportunities to engage with. And we see it in our scores. We see pretty strong grade 9 scores, and then they start to dip in grade 10 because we haven't, and then we pop back up. So we really need to think about those recommendations around how do we make sure that our kids are getting enough opportunity in grade 10 to engage with high level complex texts that are informational in nature, that are reflect what they're going to have to do in college. And so really thinking through that, thinking about our high school graduation requirements and requiring an elective social studies course in grade 10. We don't want to take choice away from students. We still want them to have choice, but we also want to make sure that choice is rigorous and has complex text. And so really starting to think about that. And our next step is to pull that committee together to say, what does this actually mean? How does that change our end goals? And then for us to come back in September and talk about, do we need to make a change to our graduation requirements there? But I think it's really important that we pay attention to that.
If we looked at that numerically, would we find that students in the highest quartile of our SAT scores took that 10th grade social studies, or if highest quartile on the verbal, or if we looked at, grade point averages at the end of senior year, is there a way for us to look at that and say quantitatively, this
Yeah.
really does have an impact on some of these measures?
Yeah, we absolutely can. For sure, we can do that.
And is there a way that, is that something we could alert families, even if we don't have graduation requirements? That
We
Okay.
absolutely can alert families to that. We certainly can. But I think if our goal is really, again, our job is to make sure kids are college and career ready. And if that's our goal, then we need to make sure we've given them the experiences in the order that they need them to do that.
So I'll try and be more clear. I'm going to try to borrow your point here, Mrs. McCabe. If we can't get to a shift in a requirement saying you have a choice of electives in this category that you must take, you still have some choice. We can't get to that fast enough. Let's at least tell folks, hey,
100%.
we see the
Yes.
difference in the test scores or in the grade
Yeah.
scores later. So
Yeah.
please consider.
100%. We can absolutely do that. And yes, I will pull that data exactly like that, but we did do a quick look and we can see where those kids were falling. So this really does that. We would work on those graduation requirements. Hopefully have that in front of you by the time that course offering book, have everything in place for that. And then all those other ones would really be done through our CAI process. In terms of overall financial impact, it's rather limited, would really just be those planning. And then if we're looking at adding dual credit courses or things like that, we might need some new curriculum resources or some teacher credentials depending on those recommendations. And then finally is this rigorous academic experience for our students. And really where we want to spend our time. And this is kind of an area that we are working on through our strategic plan. We know that we don't have consistent rigor across the district. And so we've put many things in place to start that work, and we will continue to build that guaranteed and viable curriculum in that consistent manner. But as we think about and what does that rigorous curriculum look like for our students, we've really identified some spaces where we need to find ways to accelerate our students. So we have a lot of opportunities for kids who might need some additional help and additional support, but we need to expand our opportunities as it relates to kids who are ready for more. And so we really have kind of looked at that across a couple of ways. And so really math is really about thinking about it across the entire system, actually math and literacy, but that we currently don't do acceleration until grade 4. And when we look at our data, we know that there are kids that have potential and are ready earlier than that. So really start to think about how do we bring that down to grade 3 so that our students have that opportunity early on. And even into grade 2, talk about how do we start exposing some of our kids, all of our kids, to material in grade 3. Those students who have shown us that they've learned it. Now let's talk about accelerating those students through the process. adding and thinking about an honors algebra 1 course at the high school. Thinking about that on-ramp for acceleration opportunities. And then really thinking about how can we develop a more robust high school pathway for students that have completed that AT or accelerated math in middle school. So we need to continue and make sure we continue to compact those services as we walk through that process.
Something that you mentioned earlier really caught my ear. You talked about collective responsibility across the, this will be the only time I say it in this direction, the pre-K 12. In the organization as a whole. I think that's really important. When I see this next step here, it sounds like the right next step. I'm really excited to hear philosophically that, you know, as we talk about changes at middle school tonight and we talk about high school, we've talked about a lot of different changes in elementary that we're getting well lined up about some of the outcomes. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about previously when we were talking about the planning of this and everything else, I know we looked at it from a department lens. Were there gaps in the departments, right? So I think we talked a little bit about like
Again, what it,
like
yeah.
business education, right? Like that catalog versus, you know, what does it look like for us?
I would say I did do I did some, and I shouldn't say me, there was a lot of people that were doing this work, but I think I actually did this one with the departments. And while they might not all be called the same thing, we all have similar departments doing the same kind of work. So we didn't say we're like drastically missing a department that we need to think about. I do think that we've had some conversation about, do we have some things in the right department? And might we need to kind of shuffle some of those things? And I think as we build those career pathways, we can start to have those conversations.
Because that's the part, you know, and again, I'll go back to that thing of the different paths, right? I think that piece of it's going to be so important for us as we look and see what the offerings are and see what the potential post-secondary is, right? And if there are opportunities, again, we've got ECC, we have our other partners as well. And, you know, I'm also thinking about like the CNC things and the other pieces that we have elsewhere within our umbrella here. So I'm trying to picture like the finished product already. So I apologize. Right. But I think that conversation as you guys start to lay out that framework and start to talk through it, I think that's going to be so critical. And hearing back where, you know, at the high schools where, you know, where we may need to move some things around to better serve those students, I think is going to be really important for us.
Absolutely.
Just to tag on to that, but I don't think we need to think everything needs to be departmentalized. Because if, as Dr. Igo was talking about, that course covers what's supposed to be in your plan, then I don't want to just develop a whole nother department that has the right title if we have the right coursework available.
100%, Ms. McCabe. Yeah, I think everybody knows my abhorrence to adding on things that we don't need, right? So that, and that's, I think it's a good point as well, right? When we start to talk about the experience for, you know, a single team for a student, right? That's helping manage them and everything else, the easier it is for them to get to it. And if it's that we have to have a system that, you know, the district has to invest in, that makes it so much easier for our parents and addresses things that we've heard from the community. That to me that's the right approach, right? Being intentional about it.
I'm watching the time and I know that Mr. Lackner needs to leave, so maybe we can just finish your presentation in case we have more time.
Moving quickly. Okay. 2 minutes. So this is our financial impact. And kind of again, thinking through that, knowing here that we've got we need some resources if we're going to be compacting some curriculum. I don't think I said this over here. Probably another big area that's going to reach down into starting in 3rd and 4th grade is this idea that our current AT ELA curriculum doesn't really provide kids with an opportunity to learn grade standards beyond, right? We just enrich. So we really want to think about how do we allow kids to accelerate through that process and then build a pathway for high school that allows them to move beyond their current grade level. I'm just kind of thinking about that as that big picture view is really where that CAA process is for math is going to start next school year. And we're also going to start to take middle school support courses and revise those courses so that they align with that guaranteed and viable curriculum that we have in place. And then begin to plan also during the 24-25 school year so that we might have AT math. Oh goodness, I have grade 3 twice up there. That we have that going for grade 3, that we're then looking at those pathways along the way. And then in that 26-27 year, looking at that acceleration on ramp, but then also having that opportunity to look at our elective courses. And so in those elective courses, do we have the right elective courses, whether it's ELA or math? And if not, for where kids need to go based upon these college and career pathways, do we need to maybe make some new courses that are in there that better align with where we need to go? It might be that we don't need to make any changes, but it might be that there are courses that we might be a better fit in that senior year or as a culminating experience. So then just all of these things, and to make these things work, that we had to really also start to think about what are some other things that might be getting in our way. And that might be creating unintentional barriers, or is there a way that we can think differently to move forward? Some of the things that we laid out there. So we really started to think about, most importantly, I'm going to move right here to this idea around time. How can we, and I'd like to investigate time as a lever, and that time as a lever within the school day or the school year, so that we can really think about how might this remove a potential barrier for a student or increase opportunities that maybe they didn't have before. And so really starting to think about how might block scheduling help support us? Is that something that that might help us manage our time? What about blended and online learning as a way to help us transition students into that post-secondary pathway? And then we currently have summer school as an opportunity for kids to make up credits. But what if we changed our thinking around that to acceleration? And what does it look like when we do that? And how does that open up pathways and opportunities for kids? So really having a team of people come together and think that all the way through and come back here with some recommendations. And then another piece is really for us to take a look at our grading practices. Because we might have some grading practices. I know we have some grading practices that are creating unintentional barriers for kids. And so how can we start to leverage and look at what are those weighted, what's the weighted GPA? What courses are weighted? How are they weighted? How does the 5-point GPA have an impact on students? So thinking about all of those things. So really thinking about committees to really dig into that work and come back with some recommendations. This kind of lays out the impact of that financial impact over time. Really put some significant money in around that professional learning, thinking about the time. If depending on what comes forward, there would probably be we'd have to spend some time providing staff with some opportunities to learn. So thinking about those support recommendations, really focusing in on time, that again, bringing that back by June of next school year. Then we'll need a year to do some learning for not just our staff, but our families, our community members, what that might mean, what that might look like. And then thinking about a tentative implementation for 26-27. And once that time piece is up and moving, then starting to have that conversation around grading practices. Again, this is really where we're going and we're moving towards, and we're trying to make sure that all of these things line up to make sure that our students are hitting these indicators. Trying to move fast. This is kind of that big idea of where we're headed. And then this just puts all that financial information together. So you have the opportunity to look at each of the focus areas and what it might cost us, as well as what it would cost us by school year to kind of move those things forward and what that total would be. I think, again, it's important to understand some of these things. It's not new money. It's repurposing money or money that things we would have to do anyway. We're just rethinking how we're going to approach that work. Any other questions? Sorry, I tried to move really quick on that.
I would like to ask Jim and Shanna perspectives on this as you will be living this at your buildings. Just kind of overall perspective of the high school experience, what you believe this is going to mean for each of your schools, the work you and the two of you do a beautiful job of collaborating So I'm going to open the floor to the two of you to share your perspectives on this work.
Sure, I'd be happy to start. I have 4 children of my own, and I always think about myself, putting myself in the parent's shoes. And as I look at where we are going with this plan and how it's going to meet the needs of our students, I personally see my own children in this work in a greater depth and a greater detail than I would without it. So for me, as thinking about, leading and building as a principal, but also keeping my parent hat on, to me, these are the types of things that I think will have improved outcomes for children like mine. And, and they may or may not be the ones who are looking to go to the highly selective universities. But at the same time, there is a way to kind of take them from where they would like to go, have them find the opportunity to get the experience there, and then see if that's the potential career path. But then if it is, now they've got that leg up. They've got that extra step that helps launch them into that post-secondary plan more effectively. So that's kind of where I see myself in this work.
I think as high school students try to navigate what their next step is, that this provides them some clarity. I heard you talk about off ramps and on ramps. I think that if we have a path and a student has a path and they say, oh, I'm going to go this way a little bit, it's much more clear where they can do that and they understand the impact of that choice. So it makes it a little bit more clear. Some kids sort of spin a little bit. I mean, talk about, people going to college not knowing what they're doing. Just talk to a freshman in high school, but being able to try to provide that plan for them so that it's like, oh no, like, what do I need to take? If I don't take this now, that they can see the other opportunities to take those later. I know that, another unintended sort of thing is just that concept of the executive functioning of planning and being able to identify. I know we've all talked about attendance. And then when we create something that's valuable to students and then they can see that this is something that they need to get to a path, I think that will impact that as well. For me, I think it provides a little bit more clarity in a leadership situation as far as why we're doing what we're doing, and the changes that we make. That I think a lot of times when you create a structure, people think that it like hones you in, but I actually think it gives you more flexibility because you're able to see, here's this big picture and here are these other options for me to align in these different paths. So I just think it helps us to guide students as well as lead with regard to our teachers and connect that. And as a social studies teacher, I love that they're taking some. There we go.
I love it. Audra, I would offer the same to you as well from the high school experience and maybe potentially some of that connection to the middle school work that Mr. Lackner kind of started the evening with. Was how is this all connecting?
I think that's one of the things that really excites me as well, is because much of what Christine talked about are things that came up in conversations with the middle school structure committee. When we're talking about in the fall convening a committee at the middle school level to look at schedules and like how might we schedule the day for middle school students, knowing that also is something that looking at time at the high school level, that really will bring the teams together. I look at the collaboration, I look at the, making sure that students have an opportunity to do exploration and to identify, maybe some interest so that when they get to freshman year, they're going to try a pathway and have that goal. I just see that synergy, that connection, that systemness, if you will. And that I find to be very exciting, as well as, again, that clarity and that communication, and really that goal setting that high school students will be able to engage even more deeply in.
I think the hardest part for education and educators is that we're planning for the future, but we got kids in front of us. And we had 3 board members who graduated, very successful kids last night, which by the way, was the best night of the high school year. So my hope, like bestow upon you, is that as you do this work, you continually see how it impacts the kids in front of you now, that we're not going to wait for the kids who are 5th and 5th grade now, but the kids in front of you. So yeah, you should take a social studies course next year. Why not? There's a reason. but also that the teachers see, okay, I think this is what the PLC work does so well is I don't have to wait till next year to change my instruction. I can do it right now. And I think, I get goosebumps thinking of what we're doing. I can't praise Dr. Igo and Dr. Gordon for really putting a district on the right pathway with the right structures, but you're the ones who have you have the rubber on the ground, and your leadership is going to be important, that we're not just doing the future, but we're keeping our eyes on the kids in front of us. So thank you very much for this work.
Super excited about this work. I like, you know, like there's a lot of things that are making me giddy today, but like this work is making me giddy. Just that every time I think about it, I just think about, wow, it's going to be better for kids tomorrow and 5 years from
No, I'm just gonna jump in on the idea of summer school for acceleration. That something made me, I've encouraged that since I've been on the board. I've taught summer school for acceleration in the past. And I think it's an awesome thing to do. I don't want us to lose sight of that. I want us to make sure that we keep sight of trying to include that.
Absolutely. We have a lot of models around us, other districts who have these incredible bridge programs that we'll be leaning into because we see so much potential there. You're absolutely right. We won't take our eye off that ball.
The other thing I'll encourage is, and it's not so much acceleration as sometimes some of those one-off courses, required courses, they can get out of the way. I taught courses that let kids clear their way so they could take AP Physics because otherwise their schedule was not going to allow it. So
our thinking as it relates to acceleration is what can, that opens up something for them to take. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I have an appreciation for the quick wins as well, right? So if there are something, as you guys are going through this effort, if there's something that we see as a roadblock, or it's, hey, this is something that it's really successful, we're seeing it, we think it would have value, we can implement it fairly quickly. Like, that's my encouragement. I would really love to see those things come back to us as well. So, because again, your point is well taken. There are kids right now, right? So that, you know, a new system for the career path is going to be impactful in maybe a year or two, right? A couple of years. But if there's something that we can do now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's all about the kids.
I just want to lean into something that Mr. Lackner touched on for a moment. The reflection of the amount of work, time, and effort to transform a school district. You saw two incredible examples tonight of middle school, high school. We've had numerous conversations at our elementary level. That this is in partnership with the board, administration, school leaders, teachers, the entire organization, really finding alignment in the work that we're doing. And you're seeing it. You're seeing the impact of what, when we're working well together and we have that vision and we know where we're going, man, I may not ever describe myself as giddy, as Dr. Rigo, but it does give me those same goosebumps, the excitement for our district and where we're going. It's not perfect. I'm not sitting here telling you it is all perfect, but the direction we're heading is exciting because it's intentional. I'm going to steal Dr. Igo's words. It's very intentional. It's incredibly thoughtful. It's purposeful. And what I love about it is very collaborative. Very collaborative. Dr. Igo, Mr. Buxton, Dr. Christensen, Jim, and Shanna, our department chairs. the entire learning and teaching department coming together to do this work together, not in silos. This work does not work in silos. This work has to be thought about collectively as a whole for each and every one of our students, for our students with IEPs, as I look over at Laurel O'Brien, to our students who are showing academic talent, to students who are trying to figure out their next pathway. From our preschool, our 3 and 4-year-olds in this organization that we're thinking differently about, to our 18 to 22 students in our organization. That's what excites me about this work together. Building pathways for excellence. That commitment statement, it means something. And tonight shows what that means. That together, we're doing this work together. Again, I'm not telling you you're perfect. We will stumble, trip, and fall sometimes. But where we're heading is the exciting work because of leaders, teacher leaders, administrators coming together to do this. So just incredible gratitude I have for the work that the board has done to really influence this work. Not too often do board members get credit, but you really do. Huge amount of influence in these conversations about different experiences that have helped us be better. So I'll help out my soapbox, but just great gratitude within D3L3 for the people of D3L3 who are working hard every day to make this place better.
And I just add one comment to that, because I also want to extend a thank you of support, because I cannot highlight enough the work that our department chairs have done in switching to that structure, and the passion that they are able to apply to the content and students, I think has probably been the single biggest like structural change that has moved, when we talk about the rigor in the curriculum. So I just wanted to put that out there, that the work that they've done, the creativity, the leadership, and a quick turnaround. So I wanted to just put that out there as far as the support and changing that to meet the needs of what we need to do for kids. So I just can't thank them enough for their work.
Must be the end of the school year. I'll have to reflect. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Dr. Igo, again. And we're moving right on to the next topic, which is pre-calculus.
Pre-calculus recommendation. So you have in front of you a memo that kind of outlines our pre-calculus resource recommendation. And that pre-calculus is our AP pre-calculus as well as our college prep or our standard pre-calculus course. And so what we will be doing, and our teachers all came together and had a conversation and made this recommendation. You'll see Yvette is out there. She's like led that work and worked with those teachers and brought them to consensus around this. But it's really, we designed this very intentionally. So we're utilizing the AP curriculum, which has 4 units. And we are saying our standard students are going to do the first 3 units. Hopefully they get to the 4th, but we're really talking about pace. And then our AP students are going to take all 4 units, right? And those kids are going to be required to take that exam. Kids who finish the AP class will be recommended for AP Calculus BC. Those who take the standard course would be AP, right? So those are kind of how we've set that out. We have very intentionally chose a singular resource because that helps create an off-ramp for kids. So if they've signed in and it was a little overwhelming for them, we're using the same information, and it's an easy for them that it provides that off-ramp, which is really important to our teachers.
So let's just walk through just to clarify in my head one more time. So the students who have taken honors algebra 2 then have the choice of everybody has a choice.
Everybody has a choice.
But the honors kids most likely will go into the AP.
We would recommend that they would take the AP pre-calc.
And they'll get 4 of the units.
Yes,
in
that is correct.
that is part of the deal.
That is the
And
deal.
you have to take the exam.
And you must take the exam. That is correct.
If you take honors and you're finding this is not where you want to go, you could go to the standard. Or if you took algebra, the standard algebra 2, am I saying the right words? you would go in, you could go into the standard pre-count.
You could, or you could go into the AP,
Or you could
because we
go
are
into-
challenged by choice.
Okay.
All students have choice. We always encourage, we always encourage students to challenge themselves.
So on regarding the resource, we're using the same resource. So if somebody's in AP Calc and they say, this is not for me, they can jump right into the other.
Yeah, they'll
Yeah.
obviously do something over, but at least it's the same
Right,
format and the
yeah.
same information, yes.
Well, and that might be good for them to do that. But at what point in the year is there going to be a cutoff where it's, well, you're here, or will there be a cutoff? In other words, somebody gets into, the middle of quarter three, can they still say, you know what? I'd rather, or,
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that we've had that depth of a conversation. I see it really falling into place in quarter one and maybe quarter two. But I would say, like all things, we don't ever use the words always and never, right? We say this is our best recommendation. But of course, if a student comes in and they happen to be the middle of third quarter, I don't know, something happened, we would find a way to help a student here or there, but it might not be our. Right. Any questions about that?
Yeah, just one question, since I know a lot of the work went into this, regarding work with the department chairs and other folks that were involved, as well as kind of taking a look at what some of the comparable and aspirational districts were doing. And I know you were able to draw some parallels for us about what we're doing and how it's very similar for other comparable districts. Can you just expand on that for a moment?
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure I can. Yeah, so for instance, I think there was some conversation as it related to Naperville. And this system is exactly the same system. We've just labeled it differently. In kind of in not wanting to rename any of the college courses.
And you and I had also talked about what we can do eventually with people who still need stats, data analysis for a career, and
Yeah.
that could happen. That's on the plans.
Absolutely. I mean, those are things that we will discuss, but like if I happen to be, say my pathway is in a liberal arts. I always use my own daughter who's a psychology major. I highly recommended she take AP stats as a senior because that's a much more useful course for where she's studying.
And all of that will fit into the high school experience as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Knowing that we were gonna have this conversation, I didn't infuse it
Yeah.
into what you were talking about, so.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so this is for us to put on consent. Are we good with putting it on consent? All right. With that. And then we move to our last discussion item, Spanish resource.
So you may remember, and Dan is here as well. He was here last time. He talked when we brought forward the French recommendation. We had said we were really close with Spanish and bringing some consensus, and Dan worked with those Spanish teachers and the department chairs to come to consensus. So we now have a recommendation we'd like to bring forward in regards to a 612 Spanish resource recommendation.
Any questions? All right, so this could be moved forward to consent as well.
And again, sorry, this was the one time for 6 years costs, right?
Correct.
There's nods in the audience, yeah. Okay, we're gonna move that forward. All right, great. So now we'll move to section 3, adjournment, future items.
Future items. So in June, we are going to be hearing a little bit about blended learning. We have done some work there. And I believe we have some recommendations around Richmond, I think is the other option on the table. I apologize. Supports and things we have in place for Richmond.
And then I think we were gonna go over some end of year data.
Oh,
too. I think you
good
had
share.
that on the list.
Some end of year data. I have lots of that.
Could we also somewhere talk about how summer school went? In the one we're gonna do this summer?
Yes, I think we have that on our agenda for like,
Okay,
even August, just
Okay,
to give us some
after
time
they
for it to close and
complete.
people will be gone in July. We want some opportunity to really like dig through that. But we have a good number of students are enrolled, so pretty excited about that. And all our own staff teaching it. Again, super excited.
Is it this appropriate and hit me if it isn't, to talk about how things have gone with the intra-district?
It's opened and people are filling it out. So that's where we're at, and we won't, we'll come back in July, looking over, it closes June 30th, and then make some decisions at that point. So not a whole lot to update on that. It's open and people can fill out the form.
So,
Oh, on that, did we know about what the section, like how close we were on those? There were a couple, remember there were a couple schools where there was a section cut off. Did any of those numbers change or?
I'm looking to Mr. Buxton, who lives this every day.
There were a couple schools like Wilder Rose, for instance, where we had the concern about, potentially like, we know we're gonna be really close to going over to additional section. And we said we were gonna publish out the.
Yeah, so
numbers.
all that's out there. All that's out there.
And then my other question was summer school, do we fill all the slots? Were there any inquiries as far as?
I don't know how many, we had, Mr. Buxton and I were talking about this today. I think it's 220 students enrolled. So we've got 3 sections across all grade levels. Some are a little bit lower than others, but we have a lot of students that enrolled. We're very excited. Yeah.
Were there any inquiries as far as like, they weren't on our invite list, but there were parents who reached out? There were.
Second round.
Okay.
Yeah, we did do, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yep,
okay.
yep, we did do a second round of invites.
Wonderful, thank you.
okay, we could just keep talking all night.
I mean, I'm just saving us future agenda items.
Appreciate it.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And I will call the L&T meeting is adjourned at 7:11. Thank you. Bye.